from across the country, but to highlight the thought leaders, the intellectual talent here at home in Pinellas County. And I got to tell you, I am thrilled to have as our keynote speaker Rear Admiral John Kirby. You know, many of you have seen him on TV, but I bet most of you don't realize he's a St. Petersburg native who used to work at the Tampa Bay Times. True story. I'll let him tell you a little bit about his time here. We are, and I have to recognize his mother because I understand she keeps him on the straight and narrow, and I don't want to get in trouble with your mom, Admiral. So we were joking earlier. The Admiral talked about how his mom likes to critique his performance, and I said, listen, I just got into politics, and I understand that because things got so bad for me at one point, they told me I had to put my mother on television just to convince people I wasn't a bad guy. So thank you for being here. Admiral Kirby grew up in St. Petersburg and graduated from St. Pete Catholic High School. He went on to attend the University of South Florida, where he received a bachelor's degree in history. He also holds a Master's of Science degree in International Relations from Troy State University, and a Master of Arts in National Security and Strategic Studies from the Naval War College. Rear Admiral John Kirby was commissioned in 1986 after completing Officer Candidate School at Newport, Rhode Island. His lengthy military career has included qualifying as a surface warfare officer aboard the guided missile frigate USS Aubrey Fitch, completing tours as an instructor at the U.S. Naval Academy. Also a public affairs officer with the Navy Flight Demonstration Squadron, known as the Blue Angels. Editor-in-Chief of the Navy's flagship monthly magazine, All Hands, as well as PAO for the staffs of the Chief of Naval Personnel, U.S. Naval Forces Europe, Chief of Naval Operations, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and as the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Media Operations. Admiral Kirby also serves as the U.S. Navy's Chief of Information, serving as the principal spokesman for the Department of the Navy and providing strategic communication counsel to the Secretary of the Navy and the Chief of Naval Operations. But Admiral Kirby is likely best known for his role as Pentagon Press Secretary, and you have seen him very skillfully handle communicating the most recent events that we have faced around the globe. His perspective that he brings here, from being able to see how policies have been made, to being able to communicate that to the American people that our government ultimately is held accountable to. Admiral Kirby has served in a very, very special place. He has been called the most visible face of the Pentagon in years. He's been praised for his openness and availability. And in fact, when Admiral Kirby announced earlier this month that he was leaving, get this, he was given a standing ovation by the press corps. If you know anything about the media, that says a lot. Preston, Rudy, and our team swears he has never received a standing ovation at any point in his career. Admiral Kirby has been awarded the Distinguished Service Medal, the Defense Superior Service Medal, Legion of Merit, Meritorious Service Medal, Joint Service Commendation Medal, and many others. Please join me today welcoming one of our own, welcoming home, Rear Admiral John Kirby.
Standing ovation I got from the press corps was because they were grateful for my job I did, or they were glad to see me go. I want to thank Congressman Jolly for that kind of invitation to be here, but also for that very gracious introduction. My father, were he alive, I think would be proud to hear that introduction and believe every word of it. My mom, who is here with me today, will likely offer you some tips on how to improve it. My advice to you, sir, is to be receptive. Conversations go a lot easier that way. But sir, I want to thank you as well for your role in moderating these important discussions today. Discussions that I think are going to contribute to innovative solutions for some of our most thorny challenges. And of course, I also want to thank you, sir, for your support of the men and women of the armed forces. Every member of Congress works hard on our behalf, and we know that. And I know know you do as well, sir, so please, I want to thank you for that. And I'd like, please, if we could give the congressman a round of applause. I commend St. Petersburg College, President Long, and the staff and faculty here in particular for hosting this conference, and I want to note the achievements of Dr. James Oliver as well, Mr. David Clement and the Institute for Strategic Policy Solutions. In organizing this event, as well as so many other fora, they have mastered the art of creating an atmosphere in which both sides are fairly heard, in which civility reigns, and in which the greatest traditions of the village square that our colonial ancestors so perfected still survives. And they've managed to accomplish all this in an age when interpersonal communication and enlightenment are often easily pursued, or so we think, in 140 characters or less. That's no mean feat, and I applaud you all for that. And I'll no doubt post that on my Twitter account this afternoon. I am absolutely delighted to be back home. The salt in the air, the Gulf breezes I was talking about, maybe going for a run a little bit later today. This is amazing weather. The pelicans, the Spanish moss. The Navy has sent me all around the world, but it has never sent me anywhere where the sun shines more brightly, the faces are friendlier, or the smoked mullet tastes any better than right here. That definitely deserves applause. My mom's going to make her world-famous rigatoni for me tonight, but I have a feeling that I'm still going to end up at Ted Peters a little bit later. Well, as Congressman Jolly pointed out, I've just wrapped up a tour as Pentagon. During my 28 years in uniform, 25 of which were spent doing public affairs work, I've been blessed to work for some incredible leaders and to witness some remarkable developments in historic events. In many of those events, particularly over the last several years, I have been much less a participant than I have been a communicator, charged with helping senior leaders explain the decisions they made, and in some cases doing the explaining myself. So today I want to offer you, policymakers in your own right, or soon to be, certainly in the case of our young students here today, a little advice about how the best decisions are often reached, and just as critically, how they are best communicated. So today, if you'll allow me, I would like to be your public affairs officer. Now, to give you the full Pentagon experience, I'm going to use a lot of acronyms. Why? Well, because that's how we do it up there in the five-sided palace. We can't start the day without a good SITREP, situation report. We don't end the day without a good COB report, close of business. And we absolutely won't go anywhere without being in the UOD, uniform of the day, which for me today is SDP, Service Dress Blues. So here we go. Your first acronym is NDBIT. That's N-D-B-I-T. Before I tell you what it means, I want to tell you a story. It is February 2012, Bagram Airfield, Afghanistan. A small number of U.S. troops, while trying to prevent communications between captured insurgents, burned copies of the Quran and other religious materials. The act is witnessed by local Afghans who try to stop it, but not before several of the holy books are destroyed. Protests erupt at the site and outside the base. The protests spread quickly to other parts of the country. Some of those protests turn violent, fueled by the Taliban, who try to exploit what they see as American insensitivity. After 5 days of protests, 30 people are killed, including 4 Americans. Two of those Americans were gunned down at their desks working at the Ministry of Interior. Indeed, that year would see more than 40 coalition troops murdered at the hands of what appeared to be their fellow Afghan soldiers. Almost immediately, the commander on the ground of U.S. and coalition forces, Marine General John Allen, removes the advisors from all the other ministries and orders commanders to enact whatever force protection measures they deemed appropriate at the time. He then visits troops in the field, and he brought a camera crew with him. Allen urges the troops not to overreact, to remember who they are and the purpose for why they're there, helping the Afghans prepare to take over combat operations inside their own country. We must show the Afghan people, Allen said, that as bad as that act was, it was unintentional, and Americans and ISAF soldiers do not stand for this. We stand for something greater than that. The video of his lecture goes viral in a matter of hours. Back in Kabul, the next day, Allen's advisors pepper him with new ideas to improve the security situation. Suspend all training, one of them suggested. Establish a multi-agency working group, said another. Beef up the counterintelligence teams, said the third. Allen took it all in, but he shook his head. NDBIT, he said. NDBIT. Everybody but me understood what he was talking about and shuffled out the door. I stayed behind. I had to know. It's a lesson I learned from a mentor a long time ago, the general said. It means no decision before it's time. Good leaders, he went on, make the tough calls when they need to make them, not a moment before. Don't allow yourself to be pressured artificially, he said. That's when you make mistakes, not good decisions. Alan looked up at me from his papers, and he said, I will not rush to failure. It sounds simple, and it is, but it can be a frustratingly difficult rule to apply in the face of unrelenting public attention and the hyperactive social media environment in which we all live today. One's instinct is to act quickly, even completely, to make the pressure go away. But of course, a major story like that does not go away easily, nor should it. This was a critical time in Afghanistan, a dangerous time. And the Afghan people, the American people, our troops and their families, were as well served by responsible coverage of these events by reporters as they were by the thoughtful, deliberate, and reasoned policy decisions of General Allen, who made sure that reporters knew every step he took. He would eventually, in concert with his Afghan partners, enact most of the suggestions that his advisors posed, and a few more. And though 2012 would see insider attacks peak, it wouldn't be long before the effects of his new policies would take root. Today, the Afghans are fully in command of combat operations, and insider attacks, though still a risk, have been dramatically reduced. A leader who follows the NIDBIT rule not only makes better tactical decisions, he or she also makes better policy, and therefore sends a stronger message about the type of organization they lead. Such an organization, even when in the wrong, can fall back on sound principle, self-correct smartly, and communicate more openly, and therefore is much more credible in the public sphere. Just a few weeks ago, we were asked to respond to claims by anonymous sources that Sergeant Bo Bergdahl would be imminently facing charges for desertion. Upon verifying that not only were the claims false, but that the Army would not under any circumstance allow themselves to rush to judgment, we were able to stop the story right in its tracks. Now, as I'm sure you've seen today and this week, the sergeant was in fact charged with desertion. But back then, when I stood up in front of reporters, all I had to say was no decision before it's time. NIDBIT. Now, your second acronym for the day is KIP, K-I-P. K-I-P means keep it in perspective. You are not only responsible for the pace of your decisions, you're responsible for putting them in proper context. We live in a world, I call it a post-audience world, where people, be they your employees, the media, the public at large, are no longer satisfied simply by knowing what you are doing. To earn their confidence, their trust, and in fact their support, you must help them understand why you are doing it. KIP is about understanding yourself and then revealing, and this is really the important part, revealing the intellectual underpinning for your decision. And it's about using that underpinning to guide you as you make more. The first step in this process is understanding the future you seek. Not just your immediate goals for the next year, 2 or 3, but the long-term future. Then you have to align that future to your core values, the core values you hold yourself, your institution, your community. And finally, you need to understand how your decisions relate to the larger whole, to others that you have made in similar circumstances or in other programs or other departments. To KIP well is to step back and take a longer, larger view before you step in and make that decision. Let me offer another example. It's February 2010, Washington, D.C. The gallery at the hearing room for the Senate Armed Services Committee is packed with spectators and reporters. Sitting at the table before those committee members are Secretary of Defense Bob Gates and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Admiral Mike Mullen. The two leaders are there to testify about the Pentagon's Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy, a policy that forbade gay and lesbian men and women from serving openly in the armed forces. Secretary Gates will tell the committee he wants to study the issue further, and that he intends to commission a team to do just that. Admiral Mullen will concur with that approach. But then the Admiral will go further. Further, in fact, than any other senior military officer had ever gone before on this issue. Speaking for myself and myself only, Mullen said, it is my personal belief that allowing gays and lesbians to serve openly would be the right thing to do. No matter how I look at this issue, I cannot escape being troubled by the fact that we have in place a policy which forces young men and women to lie about who they are in order to defend their fellow citizens. For me, the Admiral continued, it comes down to integrity, theirs as individuals and ours as an institution. There is an audible gasp in the room when Mullen says this, and people realize the weight of what he just said. Reporters clack away at their keyboards, filing off alerts to their editors. Some of the senators sit back in their chairs. Many more months of study and debate and decision will lay ahead before Don't Ask, Don't Tell would be taken off the books. But even the most ardent advocate of the policy had to admit that Mullen's testimony proved pivotal in its demise. What they didn't know that cold winter day was the effort and time and care Admiral Mullen took in arriving at that conclusion. He applied lessons from his own experience with gay and lesbian sailors going all the way back to the Vietnam War. He stood up a team to dig up the history of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, to examine the policies and practices of other militaries with respect to gay and lesbian service, to gauge shifting attitudes in America and in the ranks, and to help him think through the ramifications of a change not only in 2010, but many, many years hence. He read and he thought and he spoke to troops from all the services at all levels, privates all the way up to 4-star generals. Now, I'm not suggesting that keeping things in perspective means having to exhaustively study every issue like he did this one. Real leadership means not being afraid to act on your instinct as well, and good instincts such as Mullen's